She said, "I think we should just be friends. My ex needs me more." I shoved the car key I was going to give her into my pocket and smiled. "Hope you're happy." A couple months later, late at night, she showed up at my front door with a bunch of people behind her. I remember the first time she said that, standing in the empty parking lot behind her apartment, rain soaking my jacket and the taste of disappointment sharp on my tongue. Her name was Claire, and we'd been together for almost 3 years, long enough to think I knew her entirely, long enough to buy that stupid key and imagine a future with her. I had been a freelance writer back then, more word than money, more dreams and a stable life. And she was a nurse, steady, practical, and painfully precise. We balanced each other, or so I thought. I'd always liked her calm, her way of making the chaos of my life seem manageable, and I thought she liked my spontaneity, the little sparks that made life unpredictable. But apparently what I considered balance, she considered boring, because the day she told me she needed to help her ex, she might as well have told me I was replaceable. For a moment I froze, the wet asphalt beneath my shoes sticking, the neon glow of the streetlight making her look like someone else entirely. I didn't shout, didn't beg. I didn't even ask why. I just tucked the key back into my pocket, looked her in the eye, and said the only thing that felt right, "Hope you're happy." She looked like she'd dropped a boulder she didn't realize she was carrying. Relief painted her face, and I felt a strange peace. Driving away that night, I thought that was it. That closure could be as simple as leaving. But life, as I would soon remember, doesn't work that way. A few months later, in the middle of the night, my doorbell rang. One of those moments where the world feels unreal. I opened the door to find Claire, drenched, mascara streaked, the edges of her coat framed from the rain, and a small group of people behind her, phones pointed like they were capturing some crime scene. "Sam," she said, voice trembling but laced with anger, "you left me. You ruined everything. You think you're better than me." Sam was my name, the one she used when she was angry, when she wanted to make me feel smaller, like I had some invisible guilt. I just stared at her, the way you do when someone you love turns into someone you don't recognize. I didn't yell. I didn't move. I just looked, letting the storm pass through me while keeping my feet planted. Claire had always had a flair for drama, but this was something else, calculated, a performance for her friends and their cameras. I realized in that instant that the night was never about reconciliation. It was about humiliation, about making me the villain in her narrative. I didn't argue, didn't rationalize. I just said quietly, almost gently, "You weren't abandoned, Claire. You abandoned yourself the moment you chose someone else over truth." That seemed to unsettle her for a fraction of a second before the screaming resumed, louder, more frantic. I let her play out the chaos. Leah, my editor, the woman I'd met months later during a travel assignment and who had slowly crept into my life like sunlight, stepped in behind me, calm, composed, unshaken by Claire's theatrics. "I'm calling the police," she said, steady as a rock. Claire laughed, hollow and bitter. "Go ahead, let everyone see what kind of man he really is." I didn't move. I just stayed there, hands in pockets, calm, observing the storm, knowing that my stillness was more terrifying than any argument. When the police arrived, I stepped aside, letting them see the evidence. The cameras, the trespassing, the harassment. Officers took one look, sighed like they'd seen us 1,000 times, and removed her and her entourage. I closed the door and finally breathed. Leah's hand found mine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed I could be okay. That night, after the rain and the chaos, after the adrenaline and the absurdity, we packed our things and left the city behind, moving to a small coastal town in Oregon where the fog hugged the cliffs and the air smelled of salt and possibility. I opened a small photography studio, white walls, open light, the smell of coffee and developing chemicals drifting between shelves. Leah freelanced, writing about hidden trails, local artisans, coastal storms, and we existed in a quiet rhythm. No social media updates, no reminders of past mistakes, just life. Claire faded from our world, her presence replaced by the steady calm Leah brought. Sometimes I thought about the car key I'd bought, still shiny in my drawer, a relic of hope misplaced, and I realized that hope had simply been waiting for someone deserving, for someone who understood the weight of giving it. Days became weeks, weeks became months, and I discovered that peace wasn't loud. It wasn't a big gesture. It was subtle, like sunlight hitting a dusty window or the steady click of my camera shutter capturing life as it truly was. The story of Claire wasn't one of heartbreak in the melodramatic sense. It was a lesson in clarity. People chase illusions, shiny things that gleam just out of reach, and sometimes they crash into reality before they even notice. She had chased her ex, Ryan, a man who looked successful, smelled of opportunity, but whose reality was a house of cards. Her downfall was slow, inevitable, and for me, observed from a safe distance, not with satisfaction, not with gloating, just with a calm recognition of cause and effect. It was strange, watching someone you once loved spiral into the consequences of choices they believed would make them happy. Meanwhile, Leah and I grew together quietly, through small gestures, shared laughter, critiques of photos, and teasing over coffee. She was sharp, relentless in honesty, allergic to drama, and the way she laughed without trying to fix me reminded me that life could be lighter than I had imagined. One night, months after moving, my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't seen in ages. Claire, a message dripping with desperation. I know I messed up. Ryan's gone. Can we talk? You still love me, right? I stared at it for a long moment, not with anger, not with longing, just tiredness. Then I typed, I used to love you, but the person I love doesn't exist anymore. Blocked the number, put the phone down, and went back to editing my photos. That was closure, not a conversation, not a confrontation. Just an understanding that sometimes walking away quietly, leaving chaos behind, is the ultimate act of self-respect. Life with Leah continued. Simple, steady, full of small moments that mattered. Mornings with wind tangling her hair as she typed. Evenings watching the sun melt in the Pacific. Quiet laughter over burnt toast and bad coffee. Moments where I realized the future was mine to shape without anyone else's interference. One morning, brushing dust off my desk, my hand hit the old car key. A memory of a future that never was. A love that existed more in my imagination than reality. Leah walked in with 2 mugs of coffee, teased about my treasure, and I realized that key, like the past, was just a reminder of lessons learned, of patience rewarded. We took that key, put aside, and went on a drive down Highway 101, the ocean to our right, sun bleeding gold across the horizon. No grand gestures, no confessions, just life, quiet and expansive, and I felt for the first time that I belonged in it fully. Years later, Claire's name barely flickered in memory, only as a cautionary tale of chasing illusions and misunderstanding love. She disappeared from social media, from friends' chatter, a ghost in a story I'd survived. My gallery work, Stillness, became more than an exhibit. It was a mantra, a philosophy, capturing quiet beauty and impermanence, the calm after storms, the serenity that comes from finally letting go. Leah and I built a life full of small adventures, travel stories, portraits of people alive and unbroken, landscapes that reminded us how vast the world was beyond petty chaos. Occasionally, a mutual friend would whisper Claire's downfall, unpaid debts, relationships gone wrong, but it never stirred anything but a quiet understanding that some people never grow. We never judged her, never gloated, just accepted that some lessons are learned the hard way, and some people walk their paths while we walk ours. And through all of it, I understood that heartbreak isn't always loud, isn't always crying in the dark. Sometimes it's the quiet act of standing in an empty parking lot, of leaving keys in your pocket, of letting people go, of choosing your own peace, your own clarity, your own life. That clarity became our foundation, Leah and I, building something small but real, something steady. Our mornings were calm, evenings long and soft, nights spent under blankets by the window, listening to the ocean. The studio became a home, not a business, just a space for creating, for observing, for existing without pretense. And I realized that the person I was with, Claire, the one who loved, who gave endlessly, who hoped for someone who didn't deserve it, wasn't lost, just transformed. I loved, I lost, I learned, and finally, I found. Claire came back in fleeting memories, an occasional ripple through social media. But by then, I had Leah, I had peace, I had the future waiting. One evening, driving along the coast, Leah glanced at me, her eyes soft, curious. "Do you ever think about her?" she asked. I thought about the car key, about the parking lot, about the chaos and heartbreak. I shook my head, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Not really. I think about who I was when I loved her and how far I've come. She smiled, hand finding mine, fingers lacing together like puzzle pieces that had finally fit. The horizon bled orange and gold, the ocean hummed, and for the first time, the future didn't feel uncertain. Life was ours, quiet and full, a series of small, perfect moments that I finally understood were worth more than any shiny illusion I'd ever chased. We drove on the road, bending and turning, the wind tugging at our hair, the smell of salt in the air, and I realized that letting go isn't weakness, isn't regret, isn't loss. It's simply the act of choosing yourself, choosing clarity, choosing peace, and in that act, discovering that love can exist again, softer, steadier, more honest than ever before. And so we drove, the horizon stretching ahead, and I finally understood that some stories aren't about drama or revenge or chaos. Some stories are about surviving the storm, stepping into the calm, and letting yourself breathe again for the first time in years. That night, the ocean roared, the headlights cut through mist, Leah's hand in mine, and I knew that everything that came before, every heartbreak, every betrayal, every sleepless night, was simply preparation for this, for a life of quiet, steady, enduring love that didn't need to be proven, only lived. I smiled, a deep, real smile, and whispered to no one, "We're finally here." And for the first time in a long time, it felt true.